I never meant for it to go this far, but the truth is I slept with Mark during our custody mediation, and everybody thinks they understand what happened that night. They don't. I keep reading the comments online. Yes, my sister posted about it, and everyone's so sure I'm some kind of victim that he took advantage of me when I was vulnerable. The reality is worse. I stand to lose everything over this. Not just weekend visits with my kids, but any chance of being their mother in any real way. My lawyer won't return my calls anymore. My best friend since 7th grade blocked my number. And the thing that keeps me up at night isn't the shame, it's that they think they know the whole story. They think it was a moment of weakness. I promised myself I'd never tell anyone the full truth, but I can't carry this alone anymore. There's a specific detail about that night that changes everything, and I'm terrified of what happens when it surfaces. My marriage to Mark died slowly, over 3 years of tiny betrayals that accumulated like sediment until we were both drowning in resentment. By the end, we could only communicate through our lawyers. The kids, Maya and Liam, 7 and 5, started wetting the bed again, their little bodies carrying the stress we refused to manage like adults. I was working double shifts at the clinic, while Mark's tech job gave him flexible hours, perfect for looking like the stable parent. His new girlfriend, some yoga instructor named Sky with perfect hair and an infant daughter of her own, started showing up at school pickup. The judge kept asking about stability, and primary caregiver environments like those were words that could contain the mess we'd made. I felt myself disappearing from my own children's lives one court date at a time. That's when I started thinking about evidence. Not the kind my lawyer wanted, calendars and expense reports, but the kind that would show Mark for who he really was. I could prove he was still obsessed with me, still emotionally entangled. I'd get him to admit it somehow. Just one conversation where he slipped, where he showed his instability. The mediation session ran late that Tuesday, and Mark suggested we talk privately afterward, away from the attorneys. I agreed before my rational brain could catch up to my desperate one. Maybe I could get him to slip up, I thought, the first crack in my moral foundation widening. His townhouse smelled like the lavender candles he'd always hated when we were married, which meant Sky had moved in completely. The leather sofa was new, something about making the space his own during our separation. He poured me wine in a glass that still had our old monogram, a detail that felt intentional, like a flex. We circled around the topic of the kids, each of us landing on the same talking points we'd memorized for court. 3 glasses in, I started noticing how he leaned closer when I spoke about Maya's anxiety, how his hand brushed mine when I reached for my glass. I told myself it was strategic observation. By midnight, I was explaining how lonely I'd been, and he was nodding like he understood, his eyes soft in a way I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. When he kissed me, I could taste the rationalizations forming even as my body responded. It's for the kids, I told myself, the lie so loud in my head I almost believed it was truth. He's the one who started it, which meant I could use it. That's when I doubled down on my flawed logic, deciding this was exactly the opening I needed. The next morning, my best friend Rachel called, her voice tight. You didn't come home last night. Please tell me you weren't at Mark's. When I stayed silent too long, she whispered, Oh God, what have you done? That first external question felt like the beginning of the end. Rachel's reaction forced me to confront what I'd been avoiding. I hadn't just let something happen. I'd orchestrated the conditions for it. The deeper truth I hadn't admitted, even to myself, was that I'd worn the blouse Mark always loved, the silky one he bought me for our anniversary 3 years ago. I'd suggested his place instead of the neutral coffee shop he'd mentioned. I'd planned to seduce him, to capture proof that he was still hung up on our marriage, unable to move on. The recording device sat in my purse, a tiny digital recorder I'd bought at a spy shop in the sketchy part of downtown, the kind of place where you have to ring a buzzer and show ID. I thought if I could get him to confess feelings, to say something unhinged about wanting our family back, I'd have leverage. Instead, I got the sounds of us having sex in his living room, punctuated by the wine glasses clinking on the coffee table. When Rachel found out about the recorder, because I made the mistake of telling her, thinking she'd understand, she looked at me like I was a stranger. You set him up, she shouted, her voice breaking. You don't understand what he's like, I fired back, the defensive justification I'd repeat 1,000 times. That night, I discovered Mark had changed all his passwords. My hidden action revealed itself in the worst way. I couldn't access his schedule anymore, couldn't see the kids' school calendar. Then came the truth bomb. My lawyer Janet called me into her office and said, Mark's attorney called. He knows about the recording. But that's not even the worst part, I remember thinking, though I couldn't say it aloud. The worst part was something I hadn't processed yet. Janet dropped me as a client an hour after that meeting. I can't represent someone who engages in wiretapping, she'd said, packing my file into a cardboard box. The three escalating consequences hit like dominoes. Mark's girlfriend Sky posted vague booking messages about dangerous exes that everyone knew were about me. My sister Laura stopped letting her kids play with mine, citing toxic environments. Then the mediation was canceled entirely, replaced with an emergency hearing I had to attend without counsel. I tried to make things right by emailing Mark, just a simple apology I thought, explaining I'd been emotional and made a mistake. I offered to delete everything, not mentioning that I'd already backed it up to my cloud storage. His reply came through his lawyer Mrs. Chen is to have no direct contact with Mr. Davis pending investigation. I dug my hole deeper, trying to fix things without admitting the full scope. At a school function, Maya's teacher pulled me aside. Mark mentioned you're going through a difficult time, she said, her smile pitying. He asked us to watch for any signs of distress in the children. The social dimension crystallized. He was building a case that I was unstable, and my actions had handed him the blueprint. That's when the situation spiraled in unexpected ways. Sky's ex-husband, a cop, started driving by my house at odd hours, just checking on things. Mark's lawyer sent a letter suggesting I might need supervised visitation. And then I made my worst decision, yet I emailed Mark directly, attaching a 30-second clip from that night, the part where he said how much he'd missed me, with a subject line that read, "We both know what happened." What I didn't realize was that the device had a backup. I'd set it to auto-upload to a second location I couldn't access anymore. The emotional unraveling happened in stages, each one more humiliating than the last. First came the obsessive checking Mark's LinkedIn at 3 a.m., Sky's Instagram stories for glimpses of my children playing with her baby, the court docket website refreshed every hour. I started drinking vodka from a water bottle at work, just enough to take the edge off the panic that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. My facade held during supervised visits, smiling, asking about homework, not crying when Maya asked why I couldn't tuck her in anymore. But privately, I was disintegrating. I pushed away my therapist by lying about my drinking. I fought with my sister when she suggested I take responsibility. The self-sabotage peaked when I created a fake Facebook profile to defend myself on a local moms group thread about parental alienation, accidentally using a photo that was geotagged to my actual location. The near confession happened at my mother's house. The words "Mom," I think I ruined everything forming in my throat before I swallowed them back down, saying instead that I was just tired. That's when the major confrontation arrived. Mark's lawyer filed for full custody, citing my unstable behavior and including screenshots of the email I'd sent with the recording. My support system crumbled completely when my own mother called Mark to check on the kids and came back saying, "He sounds so reasonable, honey. Maybe you should listen to him." Someone got hurt directly. Maya told me during a supervised visit that Daddy said Mommy was going through something and needed time to get better. The lie, designed to protect her, felt like a knife. Then came the direct question I had to deflect from my court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking woman named Paula who stared at me over reading glasses and asked, "Did you plan to record him that night, or did the idea occur to you after you were already there?" I heard myself answer, after, the word tasting like ash. That's when I knew I had to confront the backup file, the last breadcrumb I dropped for myself. The full confession begins with what I couldn't admit to Paula, what I've never said aloud. I brought the recorder with me that night, charged and tested, tucked into the hidden compartment of my purse where I'd removed the lining specifically for this purpose. The most damning detail wasn't just that I'd planned it, it was what I'd said to make it happen. "Tell me you still love me," I'd whispered during, hatting myself even as the words left my mouth. "Tell me you wish we'd never divorced." And Mark, stupid and sentimental, had said it. He'd said everything I'd hoped for, everything that would have destroyed him in court. The consequence hit immediately. His lawyer produced the recording at the emergency hearing, but not the version I expected. He'd found the device, seen the red light blinking where I'd hidden it behind the couch pillow, and he'd kept his own copy. The version he played in court was edited, cutting out my prompting, making it sound like a spontaneous confession of love from a man obsessed with his ex-wife, which was exactly what I'd wanted it to be. Except now the narrative was that I'd recorded him in an intimate moment without consent, which in our state is a felony. The final hidden element dropped like a gavel the backup I'd emailed to myself. The full, unedited version that would have shown my planning and manipulation had been auto-deleted from my server after 30 days. I'd set that up too, thinking I was being clever about storage, never imagining I'd need it to prove my own perfidy. I'd outsmarted myself completely. The fallout began immediately, and it was total. My court-appointed lawyer, Paula, shook her head when I told her about the missing backup. Even if we had it, it would incriminate you further, she said, not unkindly. The specific relationship consequences multiplied. Maya stopped asking when she could stay with me overnight. Liam, only 5, couldn't understand why our visits happened in a room with a social worker taking notes. Mark's mother, who'd always been civil, sent me a message calling me depraved and promising I'd never see my kids outside a court order again. The social worker assigned to our case, a woman with kind eyes and brutal questions, asked if I'd ever considered how this would affect the children. My reputation in our small town disintegrated through social media whispers. I deactivated my Facebook after someone posted a screenshot of a text I'd sent Rachel, taken out of context, making it look like I was proud of what I'd done. My internal state remained defensive, though cracks were showing. I started saying I know I shouldn't have before adding but he. The unexpected consequence I hadn't anticipated came from my job. The clinic director called me in. Parents are uncomfortable, she said, and I was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The moment of genuine self-awareness broke through during a solo supervised visit when Maya, building with blocks, said, "Daddy says we need to be extra good so you can get better soon." I saw my manipulation reflected back through my ex-husband's own manipulation of our daughter, and for the first time, I understood the depth of what I'd done. I did this to myself. Where I am now is a 1-bedroom apartment, supervised visits twice a month, and a court date in 6 weeks that will likely end with Mark having full custody. And I'm telling this story now because yesterday, Mark called me directly for the first time since that night. His voice was calm, reasonable. "If you drop the custody fight," he said, "I'll delete the recording. We can do this peacefully." The confession I opened with, the truth about sleeping with him, about the recording, about all of it, comes full circle. I learned that desperation doesn't look like strength, manipulation doesn't create justice, and the evidence you gather to prove someone else's unfitness often reveals your own. But I still lie awake wondering if he would have done the same to me, if given the chance. The moral ambiguity isn't about whether I was wrong, I know I was. It's about whether his hands were clean either, or if he just played my mistakes better than I played his. I'm still not sure what I'll tell the judge, whether I'll take Mark's deal or fight for the little bit of motherhood I have left. All I know is that everyone thinks they understand, and no one does. Not even me, not really. Maybe that's the truest thing I can say. I set out to prove Mark was unfit, and I succeeded, beyond anything I imagined. I just proved it about myself instead.